Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and welcome to my pre-release analysis of Hanya. In today's video, we'll be doing a deep dive into her kit to understand her role, specialty, and potential strengths, weaknesses, and synergies. Of course, as always, as a quick disclaimer before we get started, covering leaks is not allowed on YouTube, but you can be confident I've done my extensive research into Hanya. So don't worry, I'll get you all the juicy pre-release info you need in this video. And if you like this pre-release content, make sure to like the video and let me know what you think of Hanya down below. Hanya is a 4-star physical harmony character, with a focus on buffing speed, attack percentage, and damage percentage, with the main selling point of being able to regenerate skill points with her skill. Thankfully, the livestream revealed most of what we need to know about her kit, so let's dive into the analysis. Hanya's skill is a single target damaging ability that looks like it deals 2 break units of toughness, which will be relevant later. The target struck by her skill receives a debuff from Hanya called Burden, which we can see from the blue circle shown above the struck target's model. And according to Albert, allies that attack burdened enemies deal increased damage percentage, and after a set amount of attacks, they recover a skill point for the team. So with this info, there are 2 things to consider with this skill, all of which we can learn from observing the live stream footage carefully. First, what is the set amount of attacks required to trigger the skill point recovery effect? Well, after Hanya uses the skill, and by observing the special icon above the target that it applies, we can see that the circle is divided into 2 halves. One of which is full after Hanya uses her skill, and one of which is empty but flashing when an ally targets the burdened enemy. This is almost certainly a hit indicator displaying how many strikes are left to trigger the skill point recovery effect, meaning the number of hits required is 2 per skill point. Hold on a second though, so why after Hanya uses her skill, does the circle start with one half already full? Well, the skill appears to apply the burden debuff first and then count Hanya's hit second, meaning the very next attack after the skill is used will trigger the skill point recovery effect. We'll come back to this later when discussing her technique, which shows further proof of this. The next thing we need to understand is how long the burden debuff lasts for and how many skill points total it can recover. If it was unlimited skill points per burden application, that would be completely absurd. So Hanya, like most characters, has a charge gauge under her portrait, which fills with 2 charges after using her skill. And after a character triggers the skill point recovery effect, one of the charges immediately fades, indicating this is almost certainly a charge or skill point tracking gauge for your currently active burden, meaning that each burden application should grant a total of 2 skill points. We can see further evidence of this in this footage where the Watcher attacks a burden target, triggering the SP recovery. Hanya's gauge is reduced from 1 to 0, and the target is no longer burdened when it moves to her turn. So in summary, putting all that together, Hanya's skill applies Burden, which will boost all damage dealt to the target, likely as an increased damage multiplier that stacks additively with stuff like elemental damage percent from a sphere. Burden has 2 total charges, which take a total of 2 attacks each to trigger. After triggering a charge, your team will generate a skill point, and after both charges are expended, Burden is removed. So in order to gain both skill points from the Burden, after factoring in Hanya's own hit, which actually counts, you'll only need 3 hits, which is comically easy to achieve, meaning Hanya most of the time should be a fully skill point positive support, spamming her skill without sacrificing even an ounce of her kit, which honestly is absolutely absurd, and I'll explain more why that is when we get to her strengths. Hanya's technique is an initiation technique that, in the words of Albert, immediately launches an attack and applies burden to a random enemy. We can see in the footage the enemy marked with burden does not have a half-filled circle like when applied with her skill. And based on the words of Albert stating the attack portion is immediate, it appears that the technique attack happens before applying burden. This also lines up earlier with our analysis on this circle being a hit tracker. So considering the technique burden application is weaker than the skill and starts with 1 less hit counter and is random, it definitely feels like it's on the weaker end of things. And based on my current assessment, especially with how strong some other entry techniques are, you're likely not going to use this if you've got a better one on offer. Hanya's ultimate is a single target buff that increases both the speed and attack of an ally. Now, I'm going to assume the attack boost is a generic attack percent boost like we're used to. But the speed buff could be one of 3 different speed boosting mechanics we've seen in gameplay already. The most common form of speed boosts is a flat speed boost like Asta's, or a percent speed boost similar to the one found on the Hackerspace set. But there is a third and crazy option, which if they gave it to her would be absolutely wild. And that's if her ultimate granted a percentage of Hanya's own speed to her target. That third option is absolutely the strongest of the bunch and would be wildly synergistic with the rest of Hanya's kit. And because it's so wild, we'll explore this possibility a little more later. Now, unfortunately, Hoyo have employed the anti-Grimro technology and have only displayed Hanya with a full ultimate gauge. So I can't employ my pixel counting technique to discern how much her ultimate will cost. But an ultimate of this power level likely is probably going to cost 120, 130, or 140 energy. So we'll cover scenarios for each of those 3, so you guys will know exactly what to do if it's any of them. As a final point on her ultimate, unfortunately we have no hints about what its duration could be, as the UI is blocked, but my best guess is likely a 2 or 3 turn duration. So with all this info, we can now talk about Hanya's rotation, which as a buffing character, we want to achieve it 2 things with: generating skill points and keeping all relevant buffs and debuffs active. We know that Hanya's burden requires 3 hits to trigger, generates 2 skill points, and costs 1 to apply, meaning every skill you use nets you 1 skill point profit. The only scenario you might want to use Hanya's basic over skill I can see is when unable to fully trigger both burden charges with your team. This might happen in teams with characters that don't attack as often, like Tingyun or Huohuo. With this info, we can consider skill point generation solved, with the only limit on how many we can generate being how fast Hanya is and if we can keep up with the burden triggers. With this info, we can safely assume most of Hanya's rotations will involve skill spamming with the occasional basic in the event your team falls behind her burden counter. With just an energy recharge rope using a skill spam rotation, this means we can generate a total of 148 energy with a 4 skill rotation, which should put us in striking distance of what we can expect her energy cost to be for her ultimate, and give you a bit of wiggle room to use a basic attack here or there as long as you gain a little bit of energy from combat. Now, as a Harmony character, Hanya has access to insane light cone options, 2 of which can assist us with an even faster rotation. Those being S5 Meshing of Cogs and S5 Memories of the Past. When using either of these light cones, Hanya gains an additional 8 energy per hit, enabling a much faster 3 action rotation consisting of 3 skills per ultimate, which generates a total of 141 energy at a minimum. You'll still likely often be able to weave in the odd basic, assuming you gain a bit of combat energy, but this will be especially easy if you're using Meshing of Cogs. Depending on how fast your Hanya is, she's poised to generate an insane amount of skill points, but also have strong uptime on her ultimate. If the ultimate has a 3-turn duration, it's likely you'll be able to keep it active permanently. And with a 2-turn duration, you'll likely still have good uptime if you use Memories of the Past or Meshing of Cogs. Hanya looks to have incredible potential, especially as a 4-star, and this isn't even considering the possibilities her Eidolons might unlock. Here are just a few of her many strengths. She's the first no downside fully skill point positive support outside of E6 Yukong. She has insane skill point generation potential, especially with a high speed build. She has multiple scaling vectors of attack percentage, damage percentage, and speed boosts, leading to heavy carry scaling. And if that speed boost is large enough, or a transfer of her own speed, she could enable insane 200 speed carry builds alongside Asta. She is a 4-star, so Eidolons aren't out of the question for her. She is physical, which is the best offensive element in the game, and is capable of outputting strong break with 0 downsides due to her skill spam rotation. only more so on a max speed build as well, opening up the potential for break Hanya. So with all those strengths, as for weaknesses, I can only think of two. The first of which is that if you're fast enough, it's possible you may outrun your team's capability of keeping up with Hanya's burden to trigger her skill point generation, meaning you might need to speed up the rest of your team or slow Hanya down. The second weakness I can think of is that she is Harmony, so she is up against some truly huge titans in Tinyun as well as Bronya. But fortunately, in Memory of Chaos, there are 4 supporting slots open if you're interested in hyper carry, meaning Hanya likely has a place for now. Finally, we have Synergies. Now, I could spend all day talking to you about all the synergies I've been cooking up with Hanya, but to keep it short, the most clear application of her kit is enabling incredibly skill point hungry team compositions. Hanya has the potential to completely remove the skill point pressures of carries like Imbibitor Lune and QQ, allowing for new team combinations which were previously not viable. Many supports are also intensely skill point hungry, like Bronya and Asta, making Hanya an excellent pair for them as well. And finally, some sustaining characters can impose skill point restrictions on teams as well, like Fushuan and the most recent character I did an analysis on, Hua Hua. Removing skill point restrictions from teams allows for some wild possibilities, and I can't wait to see what's in store for us. And if you can't either, let me know down below and what you're most excited for with Hanya. And be sure to subscribe for my Hanya team showcases coming up when she drops. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the analysis and learned something new. And as always, good luck with your pulls, and until next time, cheers.